what needs to happen in North America for orgs to actually really think like, hey, we need to start investing in their own talent. And these would actually be things that I would touch upon is more international competition. I know this is never going to happen.
Abolish
by the way.
the spring split.
No one.
Abolish
this is
it.
never going to happen. But like,
abolish the spring split.
More opportunities to play internationally against better teams.
Don't need spring
more
split.
regularly, and then also, and I know, I'm pretty sure Riot will never do this and dislikes the idea because there would be one server that would obviously be more competitive than the other, but we need better ping to train better players. You need NA West and NA East. Because despite the fact that NA is the smallest major region in terms of capacity, it still could easily support two servers.
Definitely.
And that would make a massive difference just based on like what you're able to execute at a mechanical level regularly. So those are my things. They're never going to happen, but I wanted to throw them out there. What do you think can happen to help North Americans, especially our poor, forgotten North American mids, get a chance?
Abolish spring split. Abolish spring split. No one needs spring split. No one needs spring split. Just abolish spring split. Do tournament. Do third-party tournaments. Have more international competition, do summer split. Like, just think of how great that would be if we just we were having like another international tournament in like a month or two with all these new teams, and it was
sick.
like, oh, it's DreamHack Montreal, and we're gonna have 32 teams from around the world all coming to play. Like how great would that be? But nope, we're going to spring split where the championship points don't matter really, and it's spring split. Maybe one day, baby steps, right? Like,
do we have any suggestions that are actually feasible that we think Riot would do? Because I don't. I already brought up.
I think it's more about the teams, and I think the teams have to look at themselves and actually ask themselves, can we actually win a title this year? Can we actually compete? When 9 of the 10 teams are all acting like they're playoff teams, you're gonna get a lot of New York Knicks. You're gonna have a lot of franchises that are gonna end this year not making the playoffs at all, and they're going to look at their roster and probably break it up again and try again in 2021, and that's a problem. Golden Guardians might suck, but they also have a chance where, Keith might turn out to be a great support, and Golden Glue might turn out to be, actual good starting mid laner. Closer might turn out to be like the next, big thing in the jungle. He's that talented. So I'm actually really excited to see what Golden Guardians do, and I really hope teams look at themselves and are more honest with what they actually can accomplish in 2021 or whatever season's ahead of them. I think not everyone can be Team Liquid, and I think that's the issue where all these teams try to be Team Liquid and they'll try to follow them when they don't have nearly the cash or nearly the players to replicate Team Liquid's success. And I don't want to say anything against Team Liquid because they're winning. And Team Liquid can do what they do because they have stacks and stacks of cash, and they can get Broxah, they can get Core JJ. They're not getting players on the downside of their career. They're getting players in their relative prime. Core JJ, still one of the best supports in the world. Broxah, you can argue how he's going to do outside of Fnatic and what he's going to do on a slower paced team on Team Liquid, and if his success was more in line with Fnatic or if it's him himself. But Broxah has a lot of potential. Impact has been Impact for 5+. He's more NA now than he was South. He's been in NA longer than he was in South Korea at this point. Jensen was brought in as an NA player. He never played in Europe. So I just think it's bringing in the right players, bringing in the right import players. It's not a bad thing to import. It's just better scouting and trying to get players that are in their prime or getting into the prime. Like Closer has not even reached his prime yet. I don't want to see. I think bringing in players after they've had their glory days or had their peak and are on the downward spiral. I think scouts need to be better at trying to figure out if they're still in their peak or if they've already lost their fastball. And I think we've seen a lot of teams try to buy these players when they've lost their fastball and they come to NA. And they don't have the very rigid practice structure to get the last rings of talent out of them, and then we're just left with a player that isn't that good anymore, and it just turns out to a team that isn't very successful. So stop trying to be Team Liquid because you don't have the money and your scouting isn't as good. So we'll see which teams can actually perform in 2020.
I mean, from my opinion, I think it's more attention to, so like things that could be more realistic outside of the things I mentioned that are a little bit more unrealistic, like server and, having a more open circuit. Better scouting at the amateur level, which means more attention to amateur tournaments.
College.
Also collegiate tournaments, but more like, if we're being realistic, even if collegiate has like a really robust ecosystem, the best players are likely still going to come out of amateur or right off of the ladder when they're really young. Like
in-houses too. I think
when
in-houses
they're 17.
In-houses are a big thing.
In-houses are weird because I think it kind of separates the player base a bit, where the amateur talent that you want to be competing isn't going to be able to necessarily compete against some of those players, depending on who they know, which is not always the best idea because there could be talent that could be excluded. But I think one thing that we really have to pay attention to, or from my perspective as a writer and a journalist, is just draw more attention to up-and-coming talent and try to give it a little bit more focus. And I know this is actually something that I've spoken to a couple of people about with LEC, because one thing that we haven't discussed that you kind of touched upon when you're talking about the approach of North American teams is the fact that they are looking to brand themselves, right? They are looking at marketing themselves. And one problem that the LEC had, before it was called the LEC, back when it was EU LCS, is when a lot of these younger players are coming up, no one knows about them. Like, what's their story? They're not as quote-unquote marketable because they don't have the face. No one knows them.
Streaming,
and so from my perspective, it's a tougher job, but I think teams have to do a better job of, instead of being like, hey, we have this player who has so many followers and we know that they're still good, but they can also bring this from like a marketing standpoint, because again, like an up and coming talent is also a quote unquote risk that way, right? Because they don't have like the same kind of fan base. But I think learning how to market these players, how to present them, is something that's really huge, and something that I actually don't think a lot of Western orgs are very good at, especially looking at the way that LCK to some extent, but like I watch, again, a ton of LPL, and they do so much promotional material with like their up and coming players. And yes, obviously their they don't have the same challenges as NA does in terms of their ecosystem. Yeah. But in terms of players coming up, sometimes, the fan base will be like, well, why did you get rid of such and such player who I like, who's really popular, for this trainee that you're bringing up from your LDL team, or this trainee that did, or this player that only played a split on Suning and looked really bad. Tian, by the way. So oof. I think, like people didn't like the pickup for when he came to FPX. They were like, this guy's already washed. And it's about marketing, and it's not only about how they fit to the team, and obviously it helped that Tian played well, and that was kind of like the perfect storm of what that roster could be. But it's also that like we need to do a better job. I'm speaking me as a journalist, but then also North American orgs do a better job of scouting these players and then giving them attention, giving them spotlight. I know players hate to do content, but forcing them to do content. Because it helps. Like, it really helps.
We can't rely on Tyler 1 to do everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Like literally, Tyler 1 built, like, Sligo right now has his stock is higher than it's ever been before. Everyone who's played on that silly Twitch Rivals tournament where you had streamers, influencers, was watched by, I think the finals with him playing all together had over, like, 150,000 viewers. That's wild. And people are like, there's like the NA fan base is there. People on Twitch, League of Legends is still #1 every single day. Like, there are people who want to watch these players who will consume this kind of content. They will watch, the Sligos of the world. You just have to present them in the right way. And the thing is, we just can't have Tyler 1 commentating them all the time.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
North America, take some chances on your own talent. I know it's more difficult.
Yeah.
And if you want more League of Legends coverage, more ramblings about North American talent, keep it here on ESPN Esports.